Hello and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. So excited to be here with Izzy award-winning journalist with the Pushback Show on the Gray Zone. He's also a journalist whose work you can find places like The Nation. Maté.
Good to be here.
Good night. Good evening.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Last time I spoke to you, you were in Syria. How was that?
It was really eye-opening. I just got back a few days ago, and it was very, very eye-opening.
You know, maybe a good way to start would be by just looking at, we're not going to do a big dunking, but actually just going through some of the points that have been made against you because Aaron went to Syria. You triggered some folks at the Young Turks. They made a video. There were some not nice things said about you. You took the high road, asked for a retraction because they had said that you were paid by the Russians.
They said I was paid by Russia. They said that I seem to be working for dictators and that I deny the murder of children and chemical weapons attacks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And fuck you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Kasperian told me to fuck off and gave me the finger.
Yeah. Fuck you, Aaron Maté.
And Cenk Uygur also said that this is where I just felt sad for him. Like he said, Aaron must be really warm in his little Russian blanket.
He said that? Oh my God. Yeah. Wow.
All that is just projection. Like this is a guy who claims to be progressive and positions himself as like a truth teller against the Democratic Party establishment. And he took $20 million from DNC mega donor Jeffrey Katzenberg. So he wrapped himself in the warm blanket of Jeffrey Katzenberg's money, and he's projecting his obvious discomfort with that onto me because his existence is basically a lie. And when your existence is a lie, you're going to be hostile to people who actually embody the principles that you falsely claim to represent. So that's what I think that was. And it was, I was angry at being lied about, but also there was some pity there involved too. I feel sorry for these people that's where their mind goes so automatically.
Well, I think, wrapped in, now I imagine Cenk wrapped in a little like donkey fur coat. I don't even know what donkeys have. What could you make? Because the DNC thing,
right?
Yeah. But then there was no apology, but the video was disappeared. But what I think was interesting is that there was another video put up. And again, Aaron, you don't go around looking for stuff to own the Young Turks on. But sometimes it's important to review it, and it brings me joy.
Look, I definitely made fun of them for Russiagate because that was, because anybody who claims to be progressive and claims to be a journalist who bought into, I think, one of the biggest psyops in history, a straight up disinformation campaign aimed at, among many things, protecting the failed neoliberals who lost to Donald Trump by blaming Russia and their bots and email hackers. Anybody who falls into that deserves to be made fun of. And the Young Turks were a shining example of that. And I had a good time making fun of them. I never did segments about them or told them to F off, but I certainly made fun of them on Twitter because it's funny and they deserve to be made fun of for that.
Right. So when I say that, I'm bringing this up because it brings me no pleasure to play what I'm about to play. I actually think it's useful. We're not dunking on anyone in any inappropriate way. I don't think that the Young Turks regularly covers electoral politics of Syria. I don't think they had a report on this during the last elections. I don't
think they cover Syria, period.
Right.
And to the extent they do, I think they do it to parrot establishment talking points. And to illustrate the absurdity of the segment we're going to watch, the U.S. right now is occupying 1/3 of Syria militarily. In the Northeast. The explicit goal, as Trump said, is to take the oil. As another U.S. official said, named Dana Stroul, she now works for Biden. She's a top official under Biden at the Pentagon. She said that the goal actually is not just to fight ISIS, as the U.S. says publicly, but it's to own 1/3 of Syria and use the leverage that the U.S. has in occupying 1/3 of its country and occupying a region where Syria's oil is, and also its wheat. It's the breadbasket of Syria. It's agricultural powerhouse, in Stroul's words, to use the U.S. occupation of that, what she calls the U.S. owning that part of Syria, as leverage to effectuate a political outcome in Syria that's in line with U.S. dictates, which essentially that the government has to go. So that is the context for what the U.S. is doing in Syria right now. And it's also imposing these murderous sanctions that after helping to destroy Syria for 10 years with a multi-billion-dollar dirty war that according to some estimates, cost the CIA over $1 billion per year, one of the most expensive in CIA's history. After helping to destroy Syria, leave it in ruins, as I saw firsthand, now it's imposing the harshest sanctions in the world under something called the Caesar Act. And so the Young Turks, I checked, has never done a single segment on these sanctions. And in this segment, Anna Kasperian, the host, claims that she has an anti-intervention ideology without even mentioning these sanctions or this military occupation. Yeah. So that's just an illustration of like where they're at with Syria.
Right.
And that's why it's awkward for me to comment on them, because I just think they're so ridiculous.
Well, I think actually what's weirder about this is that I don't think they ever would have done this if you hadn't appeared on it and they didn't get kind of embarrassed by cursing you out. Right. And I guess I'm bringing that up because I actually think it tells an uncomfortable truth about the media, which is that we all have, there are egos all over the place. And, you know, in some ways I'd rather have egos be running the show than imperialism. But sadly, those things can like overlap. But I was just embarrassed because I mean, it was a ridiculous segment for many reasons, but let's watch some of it.
Syria just held its presidential election, and unsurprisingly, Bashar al-Assad won his 4th term, which means he'll be serving another 7 years as the president of the country. In what I'm sure was a totally free and fair election. I'm sure that there was no funny business going on, nothing undemocratic taking place. Now, of course, the truth is very different from that. I'm being incredibly sarcastic. But before I get to the details on what went down during this election, I want to be abundantly clear that as an individual who identifies on the left, you can both be against United States intervention or the United States meddling in these types of situations and also acknowledge when undemocratic behavior takes place. And that certainly is the case in the country of Syria. And I want to make the case that
pause it there.
That's a good, we should always do that speed. Yeah.
All right. So that's a good example. So what she's saying, this is a classic thing that people like this do, where they will claim to be anti-US intervention. They'll claim to be leftist, while simultaneously, in her case, in the case of this segment, omitting any of the most minimal facts about U.S. intervention, the 10-year dirty war launched by the CIA, the U.S. occupying 1/3 of the country, and the murderous sanctions that prevent it from rebuilding. Okay, imagine doing a segment about Syria right now, claiming that you're against intervention and not being able to name or acknowledge the most basic facts about the ongoing U.S. intervention that is making Syrians' lives miserable. That's the first thing. So basically, this is a classic thing where someone will claim to be anti-interventionist while omitting any of the facts about it, and then proceeding to advance all of the current talking points that are being used to justify U.S. intervention. So it's this cowardly thing of not wanting to own your actual position, which is simply, I'm going to be a useful idiot for imperialism and do exactly what the rest of the establishment media is doing, to the extent that it's talking about Syria at all. Yeah. And parrot all the talking points, create a straw man about, and reduce Syria again to, which is always the playbook, this one person, Assad, not a state full of people with different views. Reduce the state to this cartoonish portrayal of one person, as the US always done in every single target of regime change. Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, you can go down the list, because these dirty wars work by, basically obliterating the people who live in the countries that are affected by our policies. And that's what a segment like this plays into.